This is the 89th episode of the Effective Executive podcast and YouTube channel. And I've titled this week's episode Executives Prepare for a Depression. And, I come from the world of expect the worst and hope for the best. But many economists already are expecting a recession either later this year or next year. And now we have more people, more economists, they're still in a minority, but like Peter Schiff, who are calling for a depression next year. So, it's 2022. You may be thinking, I've got to get my work out today, as an executive, and to look what's going to be happening in a year and 3 months of something that may or may not happen is not worthy of my time. But, you know, I talk about these things because an executive's job is to prepare for what may happen. And I personally believe that it's very likely that we'll see a depression next year. It'll start as a recession and then it's going to get much worse. I'm talking about 80% drop in the stock market or more. Um, but I'll talk about this again as far as the economic portion, more detail. The last Monday of June, I'm doing a quarterly update on the economics, so executives can kind of keep track of maybe what's coming down the pike, who's saying it, and those types of things. So that'll come at the last Monday episode in June. Or one of the other things you can do is subscribe to my Brains and Bulls YouTube channel, where I'll talk about these things and things that you might be doing personally to mitigate some of the things and think about some of the things that are coming that will help with regards to your personal finances. Um, so, you know, for me, executives do need to prepare for the worst. And here's a couple of things to plan for. And the first one, you're gonna run into when you start into a recession or even a depression is there's going to be pressure to reduce your staff. That's a normal type of reaction. It's an easy cost. We just cut people out and we kind of move on from there. And I've been watching a show called "The Food That Built America" on the History Channel, and there's a lot of examples of way people do things differently. But there's an American example, and that was Milton Hershey. During the Great Depression, the first thing that came to mind from basically his president of the company, would obviously the owner of the company, was, we got to lay off employees. And Milton Hershey had none of it. Now, he was um, a person with a vision of being benevolent to people and his employees especially. And he built this whole Hershey town around, you know, good living for the families that worked at his factory and those types of things. So um, he was, like I said, he was benevolent type of an owner in an era that was known of more of the Carnegies and the Rockefellers, very cutthroat. But he told his president, I don't want to lay off any employees, and he had 3,000 of them. So, they had to ultimately reduce some hours and no bonuses, things of that sort, but he built the town. It was something he was invested in personally, and he wanted to see that employees would be treated well. So I do suggest, if the Food That Built America, if you have access to the History Channel, I believe his story starts in episode 2. The whole thing is fantastic. It's kind of like the Men that Built America. If you've seen that particular series, it's along that same line, but it gives you a little bit more of the history. But here's some things that I want you to consider an executive moving into, a depression or a recession, and that is, before you do layoffs, show some leadership. One, cut the dividend if you have such a thing within your organization first. Consider it. The stock, people hold stock during turbulent times. I are going to be pretty understanding about why you may not be able to pay a dividend during a recession. Some forge ahead and, oh, we'll just get rid of employees, but we're going to keep our dividend. Um, it doesn't even look good from that standpoint. The second thing is then to show leadership that executives need to cut their bonuses and even the executive pay. Maybe start out with 5% or 10% or whatever. Now that's leadership. So that when you go to ask pain of employees if things get worse, then you've already said, look, I've already taken a pay cut. We're having to do this because of the conditions that we have in the environment. So that's the third thing is then ask maybe for volunteers, maybe take early retirement or, furlough them for a period of time that can, weather the storm, so to speak. And then the fourth thing is across the board pay cuts, maybe start out 5%, you go to 10%, you go to 20%. But I think the aim really should be to not cut staff if you can avoid it. Because I think you have to look at the broader systems that are out there that this affects. If every company out there is cutting people, then they're going to be a burden then on everybody else that is working. Government has to programs and all the things that are done so inefficiently and at greater cost associated with it just hurts the whole economy. Oh, well, we saved our company. With Milton Hershey, for instance, we'll just cut half our staff or 2/3 of our staff from 3,000 employees to 1,000 employees. But what happens to those, 1,500 to 2,000 people? Well, they're going to they got to get unemployment. They got to, and now in a country that already has $30 trillion in debt, this is just one more thing. So I want you to think about these things ahead of time. It's coming. I'm absolutely sure that we're going to hit a recession, if not the end of this year, into next year, and what could become a depression. So looking for those types of things, just as Milton Hershey did, I think is worthy of you to consider and plan for. The second thing is innovation. Now let's take Milton Hershey again. When the Depression hit, he was under great strain. I mean, he had difficulty meeting payroll, and but what he did was what he'd been doing all the time to compete in the chocolate industry. With other companies who are constantly coming up with new products and things of that sort. And so during the Depression, he came up with Mr. Goodbar, and they marketed it as a replacement for a meal. So when people were trying to get food, it was very difficult to get. There were shortages of things. A Mr. Goodbar with its peanuts and so forth that are in a Mr. Goodbar provided a meal for people to survive. And that basically saved the company. But he was constantly innovating. He had more pressure on him, obviously, during the Depression. Don't wait for the Depression to start an innovation pipeline. Start doing it today. If you don't have one, or need help with any of these things, set up a call with me, 30 minutes. I have the same aim, not just being benevolent, but I do believe that companies need to be looking at what potentially could be a huge disaster worldwide. So if you need help, go to the95method.com/let's talk, set up a 30-minute meeting, and I can give you some ideas. Whatever industry event. I've worked in a lot of different industries with large companies, and I've seen a lot of things all the way down to organizations with 150 employees. But now's the time. Typically, when you're getting under 150 employees, you're very entrepreneurial and you're already in the mindset of innovating and coming up with better ways of doing things. But anyway, in a world of Martin Shkreli's that are out there trying to, seen as very greedy, be a Milton Hershey, be somebody that can show leadership in the way that you go about having to make cuts. And then the second thing is, now is the time to make sure, if you're not already, to have an innovation pipeline of products, of services, of things that you can plan for and start thinking about with regards to, um, you know, coming up with ways that you might be able to help during a depression type of an atmosphere. So that's what I want to talk about in this episode. Um, Remember, there's always a better way.